After trailing by 17, the Steelers have clawed their way back against the Colts and now have a chance to tie or take the lead with 2:39 left. Justin Fields started the season as QB1 over an injured Russell Wilson, and there's growing talk that he might just keep the job permanently, especially if he can complete this comeback and push Pittsburgh to 4-0. The drive opens with a 12-yard gain on a quarterback draw, exactly what makes Fields so dangerous. His legs are an automatic weapon, always good for positive yardage. But then, disaster. The snap bounces off his helmet, and it puts the Steelers into a deep hole. Fields doesn't give up though. On the next play, he maneuvers the pocket, spots George Pickens, and fires one on the run, but it comes up just short. The game ends and Indianapolis escapes with a 27-24 win. Fields finishes with 312 yards and a touchdown on 22 of 34 passing, plus 55 yards and 2 more scores on the ground. And that final drive had all the makings of a possible game winner. It's easy to think of Fields as a great thrower on the run, and hey, how often do fumbled snaps even happen? For Fields though, it's kinda often. He had 4 across 6 games, and are we sure he's good at throwing on the run actually? 2 weeks later, head coach Mike Tomlin made the bold move of benching Fields in favor of Wilson. And while it was difficult not to wonder in the moment, it's especially so in retrospect. Why was Pittsburgh so ready to pull him after going 4-2? Today, the Steelers reportedly want to keep one of their quarterbacks from this year and are leaning towards Fields, which is certainly a unique way of saying they're not interested in signing Russell Wilson. But it seems like plenty of other teams are thinking the same thing. Not the part about not signing Wilson, well, actually, yeah, probably also that part, but more so about Fields being a free agent target this year. Or at least writers are dreaming about it. If Sam Darnold isn't mentioned as the first option for a QB-needy team like the Raiders, Giants, or Jets, then it's Justin Fields. With a quarterback draft class that's apparently a step or two below last year's, and a fairly unexciting free agent class outside of him with guys like Kirk Cousins and Jameis Winston, it's no wonder he's picked up some traction. Now, to be fair to Cousins and Winston, they'd be unexciting pickups, but in polar opposite ways.
I'm just praying for the Lord to deliver me from pick sixes. That's not me.
With Fields, he's only 25, and it's easy to dream up a dynamic offense that features the best parts of his skill set. There's going to be a market for him, and there's a possibility that his price gets driven up. Plus, he had what was arguably his best season last year. Through 6 starts, he finished with the best completion rate, touchdown to interception ratio, and passer rating of his career. Why not believe in him? So, one thing you can't ignore when talking about Pittsburgh's season is their defense. Both good and bad, their performance tracks pretty cleanly along the Steelers' win-loss record across the season. In weeks 1 through 6 with Fields, they allowed just 14.3 points and 294.1 yards per game and took the ball away 1.8 times per game. The team was 4-2. In weeks 7 through 14 with Wilson, they allowed 21.7 points and 323.8 yards per game, but upped their takeaways to 2.4. They were 6-1. But in weeks 15 through 18, they allowed 27.2 points and 380 yards per game and saw their takeaways drop to 1.25 per game. They lost all 4 games in this period. Seeing this, I think it's fair to question how much impact Fields had on winning. Another part of the equation is how Pittsburgh's play distribution changed between the two quarterbacks. In their first 6 games, they passed about 45% of the time and ran 55% of the time, while in their final 12, that ratio became nearly 50-50. And some of that obviously has to do with the game script, but you can see this bear out more deeply when looking at the Steelers' third down play distribution. With Fields, they passed 68% of the time and ran 32% of the time on third downs, but with Wilson, they upped this ratio to a 79-21 split. And this is despite the team actually facing slightly shorter third down opportunities on average with Wilson. While Fields only has so much control over this, I thought it pointed to Pittsburgh's higher level of trust with Wilson as a passer, both overall and in critical moments. Up to now, I'd always had what I'd call a default feeling towards Fields. There's clearly a very high upside with him, he's an incredible athlete who's made incredible plays, and teammates naturally rally around him as a leader, He's the kind of guy you don't want to bet against. But after watching more of him from last season, I think I'm officially labeling myself as a Justin Fields skeptic. I'm not proud of it, and I hope he proves me wrong, but let's get into why. A knock on Fields throughout his career has been inconsistency in seeing the field and throwing with anticipation or taking shots. Former Steelers defensive back Nakia Crody said Fields was gun-shy and scared to let the ball fly. Josh Lucas, Chicago's director of player personnel from 2016 to 2021, said he felt there was a bit of an instinctual issue with Fields. As for myself, I saw a guy who often seemed like he was pre-programming his passes before the snap. And it's a shame because when he gets the time and knows where to go with the ball, he can throw some really pretty passes, like this one on an out route to George Pickens against Denver. But he kept to the short stuff on routes to the sidelines or stick routes in the shallow part of the field too much. The further into the year and more often he locked into this stuff, the more defenses began selling out for it. Here's one that could have been picked if it hadn't been tipped, and if the Colts defender didn't just immediately go for the receiver. Check out how Zaire Franklin ignores the tight end seam, and how Fields staring this down the whole way alerts Grover Stewart to get a paw up when he sees the QB start his throwing motion. And here's one that actually does get picked against the Chargers. Fields targets a similar kind of stick route here. Los Angeles drops into a quarters coverage, and Fields stares this down the whole way and throws it even when the linebacker smothers his receiver. On the other side, he's got Calvin Austin and Pickens running a flat slant combination. In shotgun without play action, he's got to get his eyes off the left side of the field and watch how the defenders play his guys on the right. Austin's got good leverage, so the corner that's already backed off is going to have to show his hand if he wants to get over there. Otherwise, it's an easy pass. There just seemed to be a lack of vision or creativity in his game from a pure passing standpoint. And while he did have his best year in completion percentage, a lot of that could be attributed to the Steelers and OC Arthur Smith running safe stuff for him to rack up completions and stay on schedule. It's no coincidence that he was so much better when throwing in under 2.5 seconds rather than over. When his first read was available like he expected, he ripped good passes to his receivers, especially against man coverage. And if we're going to talk about last year's version of Justin Fields, we have to bring up his Week 1 passing chart. It became a parody of what was actually the case, but it's still a good illustration of where he was most comfortable going with the ball. When you look at his 2024 to 2025 season as a whole, his passing diet definitely balanced out, but I think a lot of these mid-range, middle-of-the-field passes were checkdowns to his running backs rather than stuff to receivers crossing there. He just had a lot of difficulty seeing this section of the field, and probably the best evidence for this came on this play just before the half in his last start of the season against the Raiders. Here, he's trying to get it to Pickens, who is crossing to the center of the field, but completely ignores Diablo sitting out there watching his eyes. It's an easy pick. But fortunately for Pittsburgh and Fields, it got called back for roughing the passer, and they'd go on to score a touchdown off a Fields bootleg to the outside. Still, I think it was plays like this against the Raiders that got Mike Tomlin to pull the plug on the Fields project. It's not that Fields can't make all the throws. He absolutely can. He just seems unwilling to actually throw the deep ones, and he doesn't always notice when the easy ones aren't actually there. Of course, I think Pittsburgh was consciously balancing risk versus consistency with their offense. It was in their best interest to make sure Fields kept things safe. They could trust a dynamic run game and easy passes to keep things moving, and hey, you're going to win a lot of football games by just not beating yourself when your defense is giving up less than 15 points per game. But the plays where he was putting the ball into danger were stacking up. That equation of risk versus consistency was becoming harder to balance. Would replacing Russell Wilson with Justin Fields have saved Pittsburgh's season? I don't think so. But there's still that feeling of, well, maybe. And I think it could be so tantalizing for an OC, especially one like Smith, to have a quarterback who can be a lethal dual threat. At least in theory. You can dream up having these read option passes where Fields essentially has an automatic 5 yards with making a simple decision of run or pass, and the possibility to rip a big one if there's a few good blocks or missed tackles. And there's this idea, at least for me, that a guy who's so good with his legs can automatically throw well on the run. Here's a flip pass on the run to Pat Freiermuth off the play action bootleg. It's a pretty little ball that he throws with great touch, He's absolutely capable of this. But then you see him throw just absolute duds on the run over and over and over again. He rarely gets his feet set and rushes these types of passes. It's understandable when he's facing a pass rush, and it should be a play he works on to still hit these under pressure, but when he's got space to make a better pass, he's got to take advantage of it. In this first example against the Raiders, he whips one in between both of his receivers, giving neither guy a chance, and his jumping up afterwards gives me the impression he wasn't trying to throw this one away safely. On this other one, which comes only 12 seconds in the game time later, he just whiffs on it and the ball goes high. These on-the-run passes go all over the place. He'll absolutely nail a high leverage one every now and then to get the scent off of him, but he's often leaving yards on the table when he goes to make these types of throws. And even with all these deficiencies, there's something there, and I wouldn't write Fields off by any means. I think the biggest thing in his favor from this past season is just how different he looked as a player. He's clearly very coachable, he clearly wants to unlock his talents to make himself the best version of himself, and there's clearly a high level of talent there that I think can be molded into a better pure passer. But he's absolutely not a finished product right now. Any team that picks him up, I'd love to know if they view him as a floor or ceiling raiser, because right now, I'm not sure where I'd place him in that conversation. There's very obviously a market for Justin Fields to be a starting quarterback and see what he can grow into. However, teams should think hard about just how much money and how long they'd like to keep him in their building. Don't let the name recognition and hype over what he could be drive the price up. Remember what he put on tape last season. My biggest hangups? The more the Steelers try to put on his plate, the worse he performed as a passer, and if he's too turnover prone to take shots, the safe passes will limit how effective he can actually be with his legs. I don't knock anyone who thinks this is just the beginning of the Justin Fields story in the NFL. For me though, I'm not sure how much longer he'll be locked into competing for a starting job, especially if he doesn't figure it out on this next contract. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to give it a like if you did enjoy it, and consider subscribing to the channel so you can catch the next one. Thanks. Bye.